and welcome to Book Club. Now, tonight we experience the terror of a kidnapped woman in the page-turner and untamed state by a recent visitor to our shores, Roxane Gay, and we revisit an Australian classic, Sally Morgan's Search for Family, My Place. So let's start, as always, with a warm welcome back to the trusty twosome, Marique Hardy and Jason Steger. Now, our first guest actually has a desk somewhere in this building, but she doesn't spend so much time there. She's a gun foreign correspondent, she's a mother of two, and author of the memoir Storyteller, about combining those two jobs. We are very pleased Zoe Daniel could catch her breath to be with us here tonight. While our second guest has had a pretty extraordinary year herself. Her debut short story collection, Foreign Soil, is now on the shortlist for this year's Stella Prize, and for the record, she would love either Eartha Kitt or Grace Jones to play her in a film version of her book. Well, you rightly would, Maxine Benema Clark. Wouldn't you welcome her, please? Actually, you know what? Not only are you shortlisted for the Stella, you've also just won Best Debut Fiction at this year's Indie Awards. So a big congratulations to you. Do you feel like this is my life, or still happening to someone else?
It still feels like a little bit of a dream, but you know, I'm happy to take everything that comes.
I thought we made a rule about not getting high-achieving people on here anymore because they make us look quite bad.
I asked him before all the nominations. Yeah. Other winners were Withering by Sea by Judith Russell for children's and YA fiction. For the Fiction Award, Sonia Hartnett with Golden Boys, and Don Watson's The Bush, which took home Best Non-Fiction plus overall Book of the Year. And Don will be one of our guests on next month's club. I did ask him before that.
Oh, good.
While on literary awards, here's amazing news. 86-year-old Elizabeth Harrower, whose novel The Watchtower had our panel in raptures a couple of years ago, we all remember, has scored another coup. She made the long list for this year's Miles Franklin with this novel, In Certain Circles, which she personally pulled from publication in 1971, but which finally, in the wake of The Watchtower's success, went into print last year. It's amazing.
Why did she pull it?
She didn't think it was good enough.
That's amazing.
She was disheartened. She didn't think it was worthy of publication.
I didn't know people were allowed to do that. That's great.
And here we are, 40 years on, she's on the long list, and I hope she keeps going to the short list too. Poets of all shapes and sizes have books either just published or just about to be. We have Les Murray, his first volume of poems in 5 years called Waiting for the Past. We have Clive James, Sentenced to Life. That collection comes out this month, though I have to say the cherry on the cake has to be Nick Cave's offering Sick Bag Song, part to a diary written on,
Sick bags.
airline bath bags. While he was on tour in America. It's coming out as an ebook on Wednesday, though for 750 pounds sterling, you can buy one of a very limited edition of signed hardbacks, which, and I really don't want to tell you anymore, because you've actually spoken to the Prince of Darkness, haven't you? And what's his story?
Well, he was writing, he wanted to write songs, different songs, and he started on this Sick Bag when he was on the tour, and it just grew into this huge thing. In fact, it's not just an ebook, because there's a normal edition for about, I don't know how much it is, $50, but you have to get it from the website. They're publishing it in a very different sort of way.
Do you get any on an actual sick bag?
Well, if you buy
I don't know. I want to know. I'm hungry to know.
If you buy the limited edition, you do get some special sick bags.
You get a sick
but
bag.
Not used sick bags. But it is an extraordinary... It's an
extraordinary offer, yeah.
It's an extraordinary... it's a sort of epic prose poem.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre. It's amazing. I told him I thought it was berserk, and he said, oh, I like that.
And finally, for all book clubbers, if you're wondering why I've got my hands behind my back, it's because I've got a hot water bottle here so that I can show you something special. Touch is a heat-sensitive book. And I
didn't know what was wrong with you, and I was so polite to not say anything. That's amazing.
Wow. That's like a 1990s hypercolour.
Exactly. If that sort of thing impresses you, that's it. I can get rid of the potty now. Now, before we get to this evening's book, let's find out what you have been reading lately.
Can I show you? I'm actually have it in my bag. It's called The Element. It's called How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything by Ken Robinson.
I'm reading a biography of Edward III by an English scholar called W. Mark Ormerod.
I'm reading The Alchemist.
I'm reading A History by Paul Ham.
on Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
A book by Chekhov called The Shooting Party.
I just started reading an Ian Rankin Rebus book.
I'm reading a book called Reinventing Knowledge, From Alexandria to the Internet.
Now, this month's release, and Roxane Gay was here last month to talk about her essay collection, Bad Feminist, but it is this first novel we are looking at tonight, An Untamed State, which begins, once upon a time, in a far-off land, I was kidnapped by a gang of fearless yet terrified young men. The land is Haiti. Our protagonist, Mireille, endures 13 diabolical days of captivity before being returned to her family and trying to pick up her life in America. Now, Jason, it's a really unusual book, I think, because it's sort of compelling. I couldn't put it down. But it is also very hard to read, isn't it?
It's hard to read because of the subject matter. I mean, what she goes through is ghastly, and the damage it does to her is terrible. But while I liked what Roxane Gay was trying to do, I sort of think that it's not a brilliant book. There are a lot of flaws with some of the characterisation, but it's immensely readable and powerful. The subject matter is hard. It's hard to get past the subject matter, actually.
I think it is, and look, I know what you mean. It isn't perfectly written, though.
No.
I think it's well written, but the subject matter is the thing. I mean, it takes on. Look, it takes on race, it takes on wealth, it takes on colonialism. Most of all, it takes on gender.
I found it very difficult to read, for kind of emotional reasons, the content, the subject matter. But I really liked that she was taking on this divide between the rich and the poor in Haiti. And I think there were some things she did really well in terms of kind of showing how these men became the way that they did and kind of giving a survey of the political situation there.
Zoe?
I didn't enjoy it, but I was gripped by it. It reads like a Hollywood thriller from the first page, and I had myself visualising which actors would be playing the key characters. But I agree.
Well, for those who haven't read it yet, tell us, who do you think?
Well, probably Halle Berry was the sort of obvious choice for Mireille. The husband's a bit of a wet fish. So I was just about to say, with the characterisation, I didn't like the main characters, and that was partly by design, by the author. But I didn't really engage with them because I didn't like them. She was sort of high maintenance, annoying from the beginning, and he was a bit hopeless. And yet it was all set against this backdrop of horror and the ordeal that she went through. So it was a difficult read for me for a range of reasons.
I thought it was a badly written, important book. It is harrowing. It has so many ideas. It is about sense of place. It's about family. It's about survival from sexual abuse. It's about couples surviving from sexual abuse, recovery, and home. It's about so many things. The writing is terrible. It's terrible writing. Sorry, it is terrible writing. And she's a ferocious intellect.
You pull out some hideous example.
Oh yeah, I've got. There's one line that I drives me crazy, as you can tell, and it's going to sound quite petty because all the issues we're talking about are so big. But this one line was, I dropped a piece of ice into my mouth and chewed it slowly. Now, dropped from where? The ceiling, and no one chews ice ever. You crunch it or you suck it. I know it sounds pedantic, but that's lazy. It's lazy. There's a big difference between crunching and chewing. Big when it comes to ice. That drove me crazy. But the husband is a wet fish, and their relationship to me, which is supposed to be the crux of love, of waiting, of hope, of patience, of understanding, of bridging trauma survival, was so difficult to match that to what felt like an alien coming to Earth and reading What Women Want in Cosmo magazine and putting a relationship together like that. That is what that marriage is like.
It is a bit sad that the writing isn't really very good, because in her essay, her writing in her essays.
Look, I'm going to stop you there 1 minute and go back to that, only because I actually wrote down a sentence which I thought was really good. Right. So you tell me, is this bad? When the first man in line to rape her, and the rape is very much the first half of the story, because it's multiple. It is part of the power game between men that is going on, basically, between the gang and her father over her body. And the first man in line rubs his hands and she says, I would never forget that sound, the empty whisper of soft hands prepared to do hard things.
I know, that's
That's
fun.
the thing. I mean, that's a good line, and the ice one is a bad one, but that's not the whole book. The whole book is not the whole book is a series of lines, I suppose, but it is ideas and strong ideas and ideas that need to be talked about and written from a really strong feminist perspective, and it really are vital ideas, but it's so let down by how soapy it is. Just so let down.
I wondered, because there's one of her essays where she talks about her responsibility when she was writing this book, and the question of sort of rape culture. And I'm wondering it because this was there, sort of sitting on her shoulder, I suppose, as she wrote it, and given her own experience. I wonder whether that sort of got in the way to a certain extent. And then there's some. I mean, there's one relationship which she has with her mother-in-law, which I think is really well done. Really well done.
And that's the best characterisation.
Yeah.
The mother-in-law is actually the strong character.
Yeah.
But it's quite repetitive. The attacks on her, as you say, go on and on and on. And I found myself thinking, do we need to keep reading this over and over? But as you say, her
I think
point
the answer is yes.
When you're in an environment of constant attack and rape and gang rape, there is a feeling of, will this ever end?
Yeah, I think that's something she does well is, she talks about having this responsibility to portray violence repulsively, that you should have to look away, you should have to close the book because otherwise, as far as she's concerned, she hasn't done her job properly. But I'd agree with Jason that the character of the mother, the relationship between her and the mother-in-law, I thought was really, really strong. And I found what she did was she wrote the difficult and fraught relationships extremely well, but then the ones between her and her, Mireille and her child and her husband, I found were kind of sketches.
The caricature element was part of the Haiti experience for me too, that I found that very almost stereotypical, that, the wealthy sort of family with a hint of corruption has the daughter kidnapped and taken away by the evil criminals of Haiti. I found that
mysteriously refuses to pay the ransom.
Yes, well, and that raises a whole lot of questions, actually. I mean, I did find myself thinking, well, what would you do in that situation? Because the father's strong argument is, well, they may come back for everyone else and we'll be left with nothing.
And they were great questions. And it created a great father-daughter dynamic. That was a really interesting dynamic.
And it was a book in two halves. There was the imprisonment and abuse half, and then there was the can she respond to, can she get over
How can someone function in the world after experiencing that is the second half of the book.
I have to say, as a bloke, it was a particularly uncomfortable read, actually, because men don't come out of it particularly well, really. In fact, there's not one of them.
The wet fish does.
Well, the wet fish, sort of. I mean, he's clearly flawed as well. But the father is a pig, and obviously the commander and Tipierre and the people who.
Do you see? I don't think the father is a pig. I think she wrote that dilemma to such a degree that made it.
No,
more complex.
that works quite well because she does, as you were saying, she gives you a sort of a hint of why he's thinking and why he behaves like he does. But in the end...
Prideful.
In the end you think, nah. You wouldn't leave your daughter for 13 days.
I did talk to Roxane Gay and I asked her, because I agree with you absolutely, I thought Mireille was an incredibly annoying character.
I didn't think she was annoying. I thought she was a difficult woman and I liked that.
That's exactly what Roxane Gay said.
See, we've got so much in common.
That is an untamed state. And if you do want to know more about it and the author, Roxane Gay, as I said, there is an interview. It's up on our website now, where you can also find lots of other author interviews. Check them out. Now, gang, what else have we been reading these last months?
I've been reading this book, The Abyssinian Contortionist. It's by a Melbourne writer called David Carlin, and it's his second book, and it's about an Ethiopian-Australian circus performer called Sosina Wageahu. And it's an interesting book because it's kind of creative non-fiction. So it's part memoir, it's part about his journey to Ethiopia to find out more about her family. He met her, he was a director for Circus Oz, and he met her while she was performing, and she started to tell him these stories about her life, and so he decided as his second book he would write her story. But then you get this kind of fascinating overview of this kind of reverse migration of him, this very middle-class Melbourne man travelling to Ethiopia at the same time as you get her story of coming to Australia, and she essentially decided at 8 she was going to run away and join the circus, and that's what she did from Ethiopia.
Wow.
That's great.
So, yeah, it's an incredible read.
Zoe.
Oh, Narrow Road to the Deep North.
Oh, no, don't. She's just going to get all pumpy around the
I know
house.
it's predictable, but I did grow up in Tasmania, and Richard Flanagan, of course, is a Tasmanian author. And this book, for me, is, you know, it's part love story, it's part historical fiction. It's very layered and complex, and it is set in a place where I've spent a lot of time. So it felt quite personal for me in some ways. Yeah. And it took me a while to get into it, actually. It took me almost to halfway through, and then I was so gripped that I couldn't put it down.
Was that because the pressure now that it's won so many awards that sometimes you sit there thinking, well, everyone else has found this magnificent, so I'll take it from here? Or was it just that it's harrowing?
I think there is a bit of that, and also it's quite a complex story, so there's a lot of strands to put in place before it all pulls together around the middle, and then you start realising, oh, so that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's a great book, isn't it? We all think.
I wonder if he'll win any prizes.
I read my first Anne Patchett, Bel Canto. It's perfect.
Isn't that a beautiful book?
It's wonderful. It's so wonderful. It's about hostages. I mean, again, there's a harrowing, it's quite a harrowing book. It's about people trapped by young trapped people, and but it's so romantic. There's so much, this ribbon of love woven through in a harrowing place. So I just loved it.
Well, a few years ago I recommended a book called Alzheimer's, A Love Story by Vivian Ullman. And now I'm recommending a book by her daughter, Abigail Ullman, called Hot Little Hands.
That's another annoyingly talented family, the Ullmans.
Well, Hot Little Hands is a collection of stories mainly about teenage girls, and 3 stories about one particular girl in her mid to late 20s. They're really, really good. Yeah. They're about these girls at sort of difficult times of their lives, discovering their sexuality, etc., etc. And they're beautifully done, and I think they're really, really, really good stories.
Have you read it too?
No, I just bought it this morning, actually. So
we were chatting, but there's been this extraordinary efflorescence, this wonderful eruption of great short story writing lately in the last 2 years or so.
Must be your fault. I blame you for this, Maxine.
Yeah, but it's been a great period. And I'm just going to mention 2 books quickly. The first is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. I reckon it's his best yet, and I'm an admirer. It combines humour and some excellent old-fashioned journalism to examine the thoroughly modern internet practice of people piling on to Facebook and Twitter normally to take down wrongdoers, someone who's said the wrong thing or kind of taken a bad taste photo, and suddenly millions of people baying for blood, leaving them disgraced and often unemployable. Citizens' justice or a horrible new form of bullying. That's what this book
There's
makes
some pretty
you think
extraordinary
about.
stories in there, aren't there?
Amazing stories. I mean, you can't quite believe it. And something just plain beautiful. A debut novel by Nigerian Chigozie Obioma. It's called The Fisherman. It's about 4 brothers who defy their father, and they go to a forbidden local river to fish, where they meet a madman. He's a seer, and he makes a terrible prophecy that one of the boys will kill the other. It's like a curse, and it breaks their bond of brotherhood, and that's about all I'm going to tell you about it now. It's just that it is full of images and powerful language, and it really stuck with me, like a good book should. Tonight, we're looking at Sally Morgan's My Place, which started as a search for family and ended as a discovery of identity. Published with little fanfare in 1987, it went into reprint almost immediately, and since being put on various school reading lists, has sold around 600,000 copies. We're keen to get your comments on all our classics, either via Facebook or video. And one of our Facebookers, Linda Jodner, she was a young mum in Gilgandra, New South Wales, when she read My Place 30 years ago, and she posted, "It's funny how you can remember where you were when you read books that changed your attitude, your beliefs, or your life. I can even remember where I sat to read it." And Jill Mennell-Penny said, "I loved My Place. I read when my children were very small and living in Darwin as I do now. It was in the middle of a monsoon. What else can you do but read?" Good choice. Maxine, you brought this book. I assume you were one of those who read it during your school years?
Yeah, I read it in my mid-teens and absolutely loved it. You know, I hadn't read anything like it, particularly by an Australian writer. And it was just particularly that first section, I think, that eased into the kind of stories of Sally's grandmother and his brother, just really spoke to me, this kind of the old folks having these secrets and being kind of really afraid and unwilling, particularly because of my family background as well. You know, you always kind of feel like there's something people are not talking about.
You identified with that. There'd been people talking...
Yeah, I mean...
Behind your back.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you come from, I come from a Caribbean background, not an Indigenous background, but kind of this idea of a history that's just not spoken about. You know it's kind of there between the surface. Every now and then you hear something. And so that kind of slow unwinding with the structure of the book of getting this just ordinary family story that gradually kind of leads to this unravelling of history.
For a long time, it actually isn't particularly an Indigenous story at all. It's like any really lively girl growing up in 50s and 60s Perth, poor but happy. I mean, didn't you feel that?
It's such a serious story, very lightly told, particularly in the first half. And it's almost like an all-over-the-place memoir, all these snippets of things that happened. But, having read it when I was probably about 16 or 17 and then rereading it, I found it so valuable to read it again, with everything that we've now talked about the stolen generations and the sort of gradual exposure of what communities have lost. I just found it really fantastic and very moving.
It does. I mean, I'm glad you said it's on school list, because it feels to me a compulsory reading for kids of a certain age in Australia, and it is lightly told. And I guess it's not 1987 anymore, and the more we learn about the stolen generation, the more harrowing the details become. So sometimes I read this thinking, well, I know it's much darker than that, and I know the darker corners now because they have been exposed, and that's good. But for a 14, 15-year-old, 11, 12-year-old, I think it's a really important beginning for the discussion, because it makes the violence not palatable, but it makes the violence accessible. It's got a deeper understanding of generational secrets. So it feels like a YA novel to me, and I think that probably time and literature have given us other darker pointers towards that time.
Actually, I'd just like to drop in here. There's a video comment which goes to that. Her name is Robin Reedstra, and this is what she said.
Hi, I'm Robin. When I first read Sally Morgan's My Place, I found it really accessible, and it made me want to read more and more texts in that genre. But other people have criticised it as being too accessible, and so that once people had read that, they felt that they knew the Indigenous story and didn't need to read any more. What are your thoughts on the matter?
I thought that was a really good question, actually. I mean, because you read it and it's got these three stories within the story of the mother and the grandmother and the grandmother's brother, all of whom talk about how they were stolen from the family. And you read that and you feel that you're across this idea.
Well, you're across one particular family's experience of it, but you're never going to get across the whole thing. It is accessible, but I think that the way it's structured with the sort of there's three stories. There's three very specific stories of grandmother, mother, and uncle or great uncle in there. Take it away to a certain extent from that feel, that accessible feel, and you're then sort of plunged into an element of documentary history, I think, oral history, I suppose.
Well, it hardens up, let's be honest. It starts with all this sort of ha-ha, and by the end, the narratives of the three stolen people, I mean, it becomes a much tougher book.
Yeah, and I think the use of that child's voice in the beginning is just so effective. I mean, I felt like you could tell stories in this voice forever, and then moving into, you know, she really changed the voices, and I agree that the sections that were written from the point of view of the elders, they weren't like memoir or even like biography. It was almost this historical document.
That was her taping them, that was her
but
transcript.
But it'll be interested to know, because she talked about the fact that there were several conversations and she had to go back to certain things, and so you read like a transcript, but I think it would be interesting to know how much.
I think there've
been challenges. I don't know if this was covered when you were learning about it at school, but you know, there were questions and have been questions raised about the authenticity of those stories, of the actual details of, you know, who was father to who, and do you think that matters? And Sally Morgan has never really
these limited columnists asking questions?
I don't think it matters.
No, it was no.
She raises the doubts herself within the text repeatedly, you know, and because it reads like an oral history, sort of reading it thinking, well, that could be wrong, or maybe it's right. And it sort of is what it is. You just have to take it on face value, because I think the way that she's written into it, that it can never be fully confirmed because of the dispersal of these communities, the impossibility of tracking these people sort of goes to the whole point, I think.
And I mean, there's one particular claim that about a parent, and she doesn't actually come out and say, well, so-and-so was the father.
The pastor.
It's certainly implied, and if you're reading it, you know, you cannot but infer from what she says. But in the end, if you're writing a book like this and you're talking to your family and their people, who are you going to believe?
The bit I loved, and I'd love you to talk about it a bit, was when finally they go off together on kind of a pilgrimage and they go back to the station where she spent all those summers.
I think the writing there was beautiful, and I thought, I mean, I agree that kind of could have done with some editing, but I think her writing in many ways is quite lean. There's not a lot of over-describing, and I think that section could have been really heavily sentimental, because obviously they're going back to country. This is a really emotional thing, but I think it was just beautifully written in terms of them just meeting people and just the tears, you know, that she didn't really need to write much more. And I think this slow kind of travelling across country and meeting these people and gradually working out where they belong was really skillfully done.
Lovely. Thank you for bringing that.
Thank you.
It was so beautiful. That's Sally Morgan's My Place, and that is our show for tonight. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to Zoe, to Marique, to Jason and to Maxine. Now, next month, we will be bringing you something completely different. Malcolm Knox's The Wonder Lover, great title, about a man juggling 3 wives and 3 separate families. And we'll let you know the classic via Facebook, Twitter and on our website soon. And it's on our website that you can also upload your video comments. Our guests will be international bestseller Leanne Moriarty and, as we mentioned, that distinguished man of letters, Don Watson. So please tune in first Sunday of May for the book club. Until we all meet again, happy reading, thanks for your company and good night.